Hello, I'm Sharon Agorder, Assistant Superintendent for Business. I want to take a few minutes today to provide you with some key background information about the budget status at the federal and state levels and the potential impact on the Wausau School District budget. Taking a look at the federal level, we know that the U.S. is experiencing a very slow economic recovery. The federal government cannot continue to deficit spend. The U.S. may face sovereign debt defaults such as those experienced by European countries. Federal stimulus and education jobs money for states are coming to an end. Special education grants to states could be cut by $1.4 billion or 11%. Looking at other states, here are some examples of the headlines. Lawmakers in Ohio are pushing to scrap an all-day kindergarten program. In Iowa, the legislature is considering the elimination of state-paid preschool for all 4-year-olds. The Texas legislature is considering a 13% reduction in educational funding. And South Dakota is recommending a 10% cut in per-pupil spending. As you can see from these media headlines, state after state face financial crisis never seen before. Today's headlines show that the federal and state deficit impacts. It is a matter of when, not if, education budgets will be affected. Basically, the poor economy has resulted in a great loss of jobs, so fewer people to collect taxes from, and therefore the need to reduce expenditures. Now taking a look at the state of Wisconsin, the state has had a structural deficit of approximately $1.2 billion since the year 2000. A structural deficit means that more money was spent than the revenues received from various taxes. During the last decade, the deficit has been filled by using one-time money from the tobacco settlement, the transportation fund, and most recently the federal stimulus money. Basically, the state budget expenditures were $1.2 billion more in revenue since the year 2000, and one-time money was used to make up the lack of revenue. Those funds are gone, and now the state must find a way to trim government expenditures to make up for the $3.3 billion gap in its budget. The $3.3 billion is a deficit over a 2-year period. So, taking roughly half, or $1.6 billion, and reducing spending by that amount in 2011-12 will also take care of the budget deficit for 2012-13. The $1.6 billion is now increased from the $1.2 billion, most likely due to additional programs such as Badger Care, without creating a permanent funding source. K-12 education is 37% of the state budget, or $592 million of the deficit. This amounts to approximately $688 per student if cuts are made across the board to Wisconsin school districts. Now we'll take a look at the Wausau School District's projected budget for 2011-12. The original budget deficit forecast was $2.4 million. However, the district was able to permanently reduce the utility budget by $500,000 due to energy-saving improvements and projected stable natural gas prices. The school district also reduced its budget by $300,000 in interest expenses on short-term borrowing, since cash on hand is now enough to cover payroll during months when the district receives no state aid or tax revenues. The net result is a projected budget deficit of $1.6 million based on current state funding law. This projection does not include any changes in state school funding law or any anticipated reductions in state aid or reductions to federal and state grants. We do not know at this time what impact the new budget for Madison will have on our district. Early indications are that school districts will see a reduction in state aid and possibly a reduction to the revenue limit. Districts may also be told they cannot pass a reduction in state aid to the property tax levy. In looking at state aid, the school district's highest aid level was $56.5 million in 2008-9. The district experienced aid reductions of $4 million in 2009-10 and an additional $1 million in 2010-11. Current aid levels for the school district is $51.5 million, and this is approximately the amount of aid received in 2005-06. So, we are back at the aid levels of 5 years ago. It is possible that school districts in Wisconsin could see additional aid reductions between 3 to 6%. For our school district, this could result in additional reductions of $1.5 to $3 million in addition to the current projected deficit of $1.6 million. Along with potential aid reductions, the legislature could impose a property tax freeze, which means that the loss of state aid could not be softened by increases in local property taxes. In addition to state aid, and other unknowns would be budget add-backs that have yet to be identified, and state and federal grant funding are also unknowns until late summer. Federal stimulus funding will end next September, and we will need to decide what will happen to the positions currently funded through that program. Finally, I would like to review two terms, budget challenge and fiscal challenge. A budget challenge is created by the current poor economy and loss of jobs across the state and country. Fewer people have jobs, therefore less taxes are collected. States, counties, municipalities, and school districts will have less operational income due to smaller tax collections. To fix a budget challenge, expenditures must be reduced by the amount of decrease in revenues. Fiscal challenge occurs when a governmental entity fails to cut expenditures to match the loss of revenue. Spending more than revenues received creates a deficit. Current federal and Wisconsin state budgets are examples of deficit spending. The federal government currently has a deficit greater than $14 trillion, and Wisconsin has backfilled its budget deficit since 2000 by using one-time money. The current state deficit is estimated at $3.3 billion. Deficit spending eventually leads to a fiscal challenge because the governmental entity can no longer pay its bills without borrowing money to operate. Eventually, it fails to pay back the bondholders of its debt. This situation is known as sovereign debt default, such as we have seen in Greece, Ireland, and other countries. We may soon see states, such as California, declare sovereign debt default. The Wausau School District finances are fiscally strong because it has not borrowed funds using long-term debt to pay for current operating expenditures. Because there are many unknowns at this time, it is important for us all to follow what is happening in Madison. As you can see, this is a challenging time for funding America's and Wisconsin's schools. The budget situation facing the Wausau School District is being played out in school systems across the state and nation. As educators, we know that investing in our children today means a stronger future tomorrow. Yet, needs are great and funding for all types of governmental services is shrinking. It is important that we understand the implications of legislative action and its impact on our schools. I hope you will watch the next video in this budget series, Our Challenge, coming soon. Thank you for your time.